Here are 17 things I wish I knew before I visited China. I've just arrived back from traveling China for a month, and I've combined a list of all the must-knows and surprises that I've faced whilst traveling through this secretive country. Let's waste no time and start with number one, and that is you must bring your passport wherever you go in China. And before actually landing in the country, I didn't realize this, but it's actually a legal requirement to bring your passport. You're going to need it for all types of things, whether you're booking attractions, whether you're booking trains, everything kind of in China requires ID. Especially when you're traveling on trains, you're going to actually have to scan your passport in the automatic barriers. And even if you're just popping out to the convenience store, technically you still need to bring your passport. And one thing to note, they never accept a photocopy. Now, number two is Google Maps does not actually work in China. Now, if you've got a VPN, which I'll talk about later, it does kind of work, but obviously no one uses it, so it's not very useful. Things are out of date and most things aren't even on there. Now, the apps you can use are Apple Maps and Maps.me. These work relatively well, but it's not what the Chinese use. The Chinese use apps like Baidu Maps, and honestly, we had it and it's so confusing. Everything's in Chinese. Number three is all about safety. Now, a lot of people worry about, is it safe to go to China? But I felt incredibly safe as I've ever felt anywhere, probably safer than London. And there are cameras everywhere, but as long as you're not doing anything wrong, I really don't see a problem with it. Now, even my partner, Amelia, was saying is how safe she felt, even when she was walking around by herself. China is safe. Fourth on the list is make sure you have travel insurance when you're going to China or wherever you may be going in the world. For over 2 years now, I've been using SafetyWing as my travel insurance provider whilst I go abroad, and they are the partners of today's video. Whether we were camping on the Great Wall of China or hiking in the mountains of Zhangjiajie, we were comforted knowing that if anything went wrong, we would be covered with SafetyWing. Under SafetyWing policy, you get covered for many different things whilst you are traveling. And one of the great benefits, which I love as a digital nomad, is your flights home are actually covered if something bad happens, such as a family member passing away. Obviously, touch wood, nothing like this ever happens, but as a nomad myself, I know this is a potential unexpected cost I can just avoid by being covered with SafetyWing. As you probably know, I spend a long time abroad, away from home, and every 2 or 3 times a year, I love to go home and see my family, see my friends, and just catch up. And with SafetyWing, you're actually covered for trips home whilst you're in your home country for up to 30 days or 15 days as a US citizen for every 90 days which you travel abroad. And obviously, SafetyWing covers you for medical expenses such as getting sick or injured, and that's why I highly recommend clicking the top link in the description to get yourself covered on your next trip. Go get yourself covered, and let's move on to number 5, which is use Didi. Didi is an application you can get on your phone, and it's basically the Chinese equivalent of Uber or Grab. And it is super affordable, probably more affordable than like Grab in Indonesia or Grab in Thailand. I was amazed, and you can practically get them anywhere. I think every place we visited in China over a month, there was Didis. Whenever you want, you can just call a Didi and it would literally arrive in a couple of minutes. There must be so many. And now using the Didi app is really simple. It's just like Uber and it's in English, which is a very important thing if you don't speak any Chinese. It's going to make things much easier than trying to speak to taxi drivers over translation apps and stuff. Download Didi. If you don't speak Chinese, it's going to be your lifesaver. Number 6 is you need mobile data whilst you're in China. Mobile data is used for loads of stuff like WeChat, Alipay, looking up stuff, using translation apps. Just trust me, especially if you don't speak Chinese, you're gonna need mobile data. Now, what I did was get an eSIM because eSIMs are so much easier because you can get them before you even enter the country. And the 2 eSIM providers that I kind of use is Olafly and Aerolo. Olafly is more like an unlimited data plans, and you can kind of choose how long you're in the country and just get unlimited data. I'll leave both of those in the description if you want to get one of those before you travel to China. Now, the other benefit to using an eSIM, which I didn't even realize before setting foot in China, is that an eSIM kind of works as a VPN. Because it's based in like Hong Kong or Singapore or just another country outside of China, you can kind of still access Google, Instagram, Facebook, all that kind of stuff, as long as you're not on like a local Wi-Fi network, logged into your hostel Wi-Fi. that's not going to work as a VPN. You're going to need another VPN, which I'll explain later on. Number 7, getting around China was one of the best and easiest things and fastest things that I've ever done. Now, if you didn't realize, China is actually, I think, bigger land area than the United States. So it's a massive country. And the great thing about China is they have the high-speed, super fast trains. And this means getting around the whole country is super fast, super easy, and fairly affordable compared to flights. The great thing about using the trains rather than flights is you can just turn up 30 minutes beforehand, jump on a high-speed train, and you'll be supersonic sped to your next destination. All the trains seem very modern. Like, we were really impressed with the trains, even like more modern than the ones in Japan because they've been built more recently. And the network connecting all the high-speed trains around China is actually the largest in the world by a country mile. So wherever you want to go, you've probably got a high-speed train going there. We booked all our high-speed trains on trip.com, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. I know there's a lot of links, but trust me, you're going to need these links all in the description, which I'll lay out because it's just going to help you book and plan your trip to China. Now, number 8. When to go on your trip to China. Now, there's definitely some times which I would advise to go, and other times maybe I would avoid traveling China. For example, on bank holidays and Chinese holidays, it is going to be super busy traveling. We were in Shanghai last year during the summer holidays, and I've never seen so many people in my life. It was just packed. It was packed. Chinese New Year is going to be super busy. Maybe just avoid it or just go for the experience. So July and August is not really a great time to go as everyone's on their summer holidays. Now, a great time to travel China where the crowds aren't too big, it's not too hot, it's not too cold, is May to June and September and October. These are like the shoulder months and kind of the real sweet spots of when you should visit China. We kind of went in June and it started to get busier towards the end, and honestly it got a little bit hot. So May would probably be your sweet spot, maybe October if you're going in the fall. Now, number 9, China is a very different culture. It's very different from lots of other places you'll travel, maybe a little bit similar to Vietnam and the Far East, but it is different. Things like queue jumping was a big thing. We were a little bit shocked at times. People would just cut in front of you and wouldn't even realize you're there. The other things is like spitting in public is a very common thing. We were very shocked walking through cities. People are spitting everywhere. I think it's just something to do with the Chinese medicine and clearing your throat or whatever, but it was a little bit of a shock, and it's just like, okay, wasn't expecting that, but that's how they do it in China. Number 10, let's talk about visas, because visas are a big thing which puts off a lot of people from traveling to China. But recently, China have just released these countries right here, a 15-day visa-free travel to mainland China. So this means if you're from these countries, you get 15 days where you don't have to do any paperwork whatsoever. However, if you're not from one of these countries and you're from the UK or the US, then there is a lot of paperwork. These are the 2 wadges of paper which we need for our Chinese visa, and you have to go to a Chinese visa center. We went to the one in London, and there's actually 4 different centers over the UK. So luckily you don't just have to travel to the capital city. We applied for a 30-day tourist visa, and they actually came back and gave us a 2-year multi-entry visa for up to 90 days. So maybe they're just being really lenient with visas at the moment, but just go for the 30-day visa and see what you get. Yes, the visa process is long and tiring, and you have to book all your hotels in advance, book your return ticket, but trust me, it's going to be worth it. Your trip to China will be incredible. Now pause there for one moment. We are just over the halfway mark, and if this video has provided you any value at all, if you've learned anything, then please go down and hit the subscribe button. It helps us to keep on traveling, giving you this vital information to help you travel China or other countries in the world. So please go hit it, and let's move on. Now, number 11 is about the subway systems, and the subway systems are in lots of major cities in China, and they're very similar to subway systems in Europe or Singapore or the US or wherever you are from. So it's going to be very simple to use, and the great thing is they are in English. So the signs are in English and the announcements are also in English. So you don't speak Chinese, you're going to be fine. Now, one thing to remember, because we got confused, is that once they translate it from the Chinese characters to the English way of spelling stuff, a lot of the stations are very, very similar. Look at all the letters and just make sure that they match where you're trying to go, because some stations are really similar. So we ended up a couple of times going to a different station which had a very similar name to the station we were trying to go to. Number 12 is about the food. So in China, they kind of did it a little bit different in some restaurants, and you'd order food for like the table or your group that you were in. You put it in the middle and then you kind of share, and you can try like little different bits. We didn't realize that at first, but we kind of got to the gist and was kind of seeing what other people were doing. Just try loads of food whilst you're in China, because we were impressed at how good the food was. And it was also super affordable too, especially once we get to the south. Outside of Beijing and Shanghai, the big cities, stuff, especially food, gets cheaper. Surprisingly, they actually have loads of McDonald's, loads of Starbucks, loads of KFCs everywhere in China. There's probably more of those chains than I've seen anywhere else in the world. I haven't really been to the US much, so maybe they've got more there, probably. Number 13 is get a good translation app, because you're going to need this all of the time if you don't speak much Chinese or don't speak any Chinese whatsoever, just like us. You're going to be translating all things like screenshots on applications, taking photos of menus, just talking to people to buy a bottle of water. If you don't speak any Chinese, please don't let this put you off traveling China, because it's easy to get around and the Chinese are very nimble and quick to use the translation apps even on their phones to help you out. Number 14, let's talk about VPNs. Now, if you want to access things like Google or Instagram, Facebook, any social media, or even just general websites, that's going to be practically impossible in China, because 15 is something we didn't actually face, but other people were telling us about this. If you're staying in an apartment or a small hotel or guest house and they're not used to taking international tourists, then you actually have to register with the local police. Normally, the hotel or hostel will do this for you, but in some small cases, you're going to have to register it yourself. And I think you just have to go to the police station. But what my recommendation is book international hostels, book international hotels, and you won't have to do this, and it'll just save you a lot of time. Number 16 is how to pay in China, because it's very different from other countries. They don't really use international debit and credit cards, and they actually use QR payments with WeChat and Alipay. These are the two most common ways of paying. I would highly recommend setting up WeChat and Alipay before you set foot in China, because sometimes you have to verify it with your phone number and you might not be able to access the verification code with your number when you're in China. So just get it set up before you start your trip. Once or twice our Alipay and WeChat would not go through, and for some reason it would not work. So we always made sure we had some backup cash. Cash isn't that common, but most places still accept cash. You just have to ask them, can I pay in cash, or just show them cash. Because you're using QR payments, which uses your phone, you're going to need to make sure your phone is always charged. And there's lots of power banks which you can use throughout the cities and lots of different locations, but also just make sure you've got a power bank on you so you can always charge it up so you can pay for stuff. And finally, we are on to the final one, and this is all about booking stuff, booking attractions, booking tickets, booking trains, flights, hotels, all that kind of stuff. Now, the best platform to use whilst you're in China is going to be trip.com. They are a Chinese-based company, so they have access to all the high-speed trains, and it saves you having to navigate Chinese websites to book things like trains. Also, trip.com have far more hotels on their website than places like booking.com. But in all honesty, we use booking.com quite a bit, and there are still some really good options on there. Now, one of the problems we had was booking stuff on WeChat channels. Now, the problem with this is a lot of the stuff is in Chinese, and if you want to go to the famous things like the Forbidden City, then booking it on WeChat channels can be quite complicated, and your best bet is to ask a Chinese person to help you book it. The other thing is you have to book these things in advance, because they do sell out, especially the Forbidden City. Booking stuff on trip.com can be slightly more expensive than using it in person or using the Chinese websites, but if you only speak English, it's the only real way to book stuff. And that's it, 17 things which I wish I knew before I visited China. If this video provided you any value at all, then go down there and hit the subscribe button. Now, China is a beautiful country. There is so much to see. It is harder to travel than other countries, but you're going to have an incredible time going with an open mind, and you'll absolutely love it. Now, subscribe to this channel right now, and we'll see you in the next one.